Tim Urban and Torill Kornfeldt. And great keynotes last night, both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So the reason we're here, all three of us, is that Torill and I were talking about your AI blog posts, which were also the topic of your keynote. And Torill had so many interesting questions, because you come from more of a biology standpoint than, well, most of the rest of us here at a tech conference. And I found myself thinking, I wish Torill could just ask these questions to Tim and see what kind of discussion we get from it without me getting in between and sort of butchering your thought-out questions. So that's why we're here. And so I thought we'd start with your perspective on the AI.
Well, yeah, because one of the things that I really want to, because you've sort of gone into the AI community, and one of the things that I really find fascinating about the biological systems, it's that they're not just about the sort of raw neural computational power. Like if you look at, say, a bee has the brain the size of a sesame seed, but biologically they can do everything that we can do. I mean, the difference between us and a bee is minuscule. It's that we're basically the same. We can do the same stuff. And I think one of the reasons why biology is so complex and we can do all those really weird things with our brains is that we have those, several systems layered on top of each other. So we have the neural network, but that's just the baseline, because then you have a chemical network on top of that, and you have a whole sort of time lag on top of that, because you have neural transmitters, which basically take a few seconds or a few minutes and maybe half an hour, and then you have the whole gene regulation of let's make more neural transmitters and let's make more hormones, and and you have growth over time, you have changes over time. So compared to technological systems, biology systems have all of those multiple layers, which actually add tremendously to the intelligence, because the intelligence is just that base layer of neurology that, from a biology point of view, it's really new and is not the most important one. I mean, is there anything similar to that type of chemical system within AI?
I haven't thought of it that way. I think it's very interesting. I think it's really interesting to think about the neural network, and then the chemicals on top of that. I don't think that people think about that very often. And when it comes to AI, I think people both overestimate and underestimate the brain, is what I kind of come to just by talking to people and by thinking about what I knew and my own misconceptions. We underestimate the brain in that we think, a calculator is much faster than we are. All these things are much more, Google search engine, all these fancy AI, they're much smarter than just our simple brain. We can barely do math at all. And that's actually really not true. Like, our brain is, the calculations per second is outrageous. And I heard someone call the human brain, the most complex known object in the universe, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
It is pretty cool, but you could say the same thing about a whale brain or a dog brain.
So you said that about the bee, or about it. So I guess actually I'm curious about that. Explain why you're saying that a bee brain is as complex as a human brain.
Because if you look at, from a biological point of view, the thing that makes us human are just this tiny piece of what's actually going on. So if you look at what a bee does, and they have really complex societies, so they can do, first of all, they can do all of their bodily functions, of course. Everything in their body works from the brain.
They have vision, they eat, they digest.
They walk, they fly, they grow.
All the motor skills.
All the motor skills work, and they have, a complex social society, which means they can recognize different individuals. They have a really advanced communication systems, which means that they can transfer information about, there's a flower with this quality of nectar in that direction, this distance. Mm-hmm. So they have a really advanced community. They have information transfer between individuals. They have information transfer within the bee community, which means they can regulate temperature, they can make it bigger or smaller, they can make revolutions, kill the queen in a hot ball of fire. It's actually really horrible.
They do that?
They do that. They sort of
That is very interesting.
so the queen, when she gets old, I mean they're all female, but so when the queen gets old, she can't produce the hormones that regulates the hive, which means there's a revolution, and they all sort of gang up together and they sit on her and they buzz so that she heats up and dies.
That is so annoying for her. After all she's done for them.
And they're all their kids. I mean, it's their kids.
Her kids.
Yes.
Can we just talk about bees? On this?
Sure.
Actually,
Any
really,
direction
really
you
want
want
to know.
to go.
So I don't talk to enough biologists. I've been reading so many physicists and engineers. But this is great.
It is. I mean, so basically, and you can do all of this with a brain the size of a sesame seed.
Right. Yeah.
And more. I mean, there's so much more. They have better vision than us in many aspects.
But they're severely lacking in intelligence when it comes to comparing to us. Right?
Well, they are severely lacking in the intelligence that we have.
Right. Right. I mean, you can say all the instinct. Elephants can sense land 400 miles away, they over water or something like that. One of those situations when there's all kind of animal intelligence. That's
but I mean, the problem is that we are sort of lacking a good definition of intelligence.
Yeah.
We're lacking something that we can use to compare ourselves, octopus, elephant, bees, aliens, and computers. We don't have a test that will work for all of these unities.
Right.
Basically because we don't have a definition of intelligence that goes outside the human perspective. So we deem animals intelligent when they can do things like us, when they can recognize themselves in the mirror, for example. That's one of the sort of key tests for animals' intelligence. Mm-hmm. But, you wouldn't really expect an AI to recognize itself in a mirror either.
Right. Unless you programmed it to, and then it probably pretty easily could, actually, right?
Yeah.
But the question is, would it recognize itself as a self? I mean, that's when you get to a whole other question. You get that's this entire debate about consciousness and about that whole thing. But back to what you're saying. So what you're kind of saying is that there's a lot going on in biology, and it's not just a matter of a linear intelligence scale, but there's a lot of things going on, a lot of layers, like you said. And when it comes to AI, the question is, do we need to mimic all those layers, or is the important thing something that is more linear with AI? And can we build a machine that has a certain kind of intelligence that's important to us, that's actually a very simple situation? And I don't know, but I think, as I said, I think we underestimate brains, but I also think we also overestimate brains in that people don't get that actually the brain's a pretty weak computer as far as it goes, and it's actually very slow. The speed at which information travels inside the brain is molasses compared to what it does in a computer. So it's this weird thing where we're trying to emulate one component of it, but we also we easily can defeat it with another component. But I guess I would probably turn this question around on you, because you understand brains a lot better than I do. So I would ask you what you think. As we're creating kind of AI, how should we measure intelligence, and are technologists underestimating the challenge of creating human level intelligence by ignoring some of these biological systems and layers that computers don't traditionally have?
Yeah, I really think so. I really think that ignoring basically the chemistry and the hormone input is a huge error, because you're going to end up with something that is very... I mean, if we are going to continue measure intelligence basically in being like us, we do the sort of human level intelligence of an AI, and even if it's going to be completely different, we're going to sort of measure its intelligence compared to us. Because then we sort of want it to do some of the things that we do. We want it to be similar to us because otherwise we wouldn't recognize it as intelligent in the same way that we don't recognize an ant as intelligent.
Okay, question I have though is, so you talk about hormones and chemicals and all of that. That's part of the layers we're talking about. But really all that is information, right? Hormones is just, it's just information that causes some kind of synapses to fire in certain ways. And when you're building something as a computer, why would you need that? You know, human brains need blood and oxygen. We don't need to mimic that in a computer, right? And
Perhaps
so
not.
what?
Perhaps not.
Well, but the point is, blood is a mechanism to carry energy and other things to cells in the brain. We have instead here we have transistors, and you have electricity, so I feel like when we talk about something like hormones, wouldn't that just be part of the code? Wouldn't that be just part of the algorithms that we build?
Well, I'm not a coder, so I'm not really sure how you would.
I'm not
build
either.
It. But the thing is that I would say that the sort of the chemical levels, that would be our sort of, the core programming that you talked about yesterday, the things that really drives us. So if you would make a perfect copy of the brain of all of the neural firing, but you ignored the chemistry, you took away the chemistry, you would have nothing. I mean, you wouldn't have anything, from the drive to get a Nobel Prize to the drive to go to the toilet, it would all be gone.
It's all chemicals.
That's all chemicals.
So the brain without those hormones and chemicals is just like a blank computer, is kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Or interesting.
So one of the interesting things about neural networks is that they're constantly changing. It's not a very stable system.
Yeah.
So you have this constant level of chemistry that alters it, and it alters it on so many levels and at such a time scale. So you have these chemicals that will alter it. Right now I slept well and I had my cup of tea and I had breakfast this morning, which means my neurons are firing in one way. If I hadn't done that, I would be a different human because my chemistry would be different. So
right now, currently, I'm on an all-nighter because I was working on my post. So what's that doing? What? Explain how that is changing me as a human.
So what is changing is all of these minuscule changes are going on, where it's going to say, prioritize this thing instead of this thing. Prioritize getting your next meal instead of doing something social. Right. Prioritize this instead of that. You're going to have mood swings, and then you're going to go, why can't my rational brain sort of override those mood swings? But it's actually the other way around.
Right, the brain is serving the body in a lot of ways.
The brain is serving the body. Right.
Yeah, this is stuff I haven't thought of. It's very interesting to hear a biologist's perspective on something like AI, because there's the thinkers that I read, they're not thinking about this that much either, I don't think.
No, but that's a sort of really human misconception.
Yeah.
You sort of go, I am brain, the body is just, stuff that happens to be around me.
Yeah.
The me, the self, that is the brain, and therefore I can sort of get rid of all of this
Right, we don't
stuff.
realize how much of us,
our
personalities is related to actually serving our body's needs. Like I think, people always talk about, Ray Kurzweil type people talk about uploading our consciousness, uploading our brains to a computer, and the assumption is that everything that makes me would be there, but it's like you're saying that's not true at all. Actually, without serving a body, the brain is a totally different creature. You probably have a totally different personality if you have one at all.
My perception is that that's going to be extreme. It's going to be a lot easier to transfer your brain to a dog than it's going to be to transfer your brain to a computer. A lot easier.
Mm-hmm. That would be cool, by the way.
It would be. It would be amazing.
That would be very, very cool. I mean, imagine if there were a human-level intelligent dog.
Yes.
How cool that... Oh, what a popular dog, too.
And then you would, imagine the information that you could get access to.
Right.
Because if you had a communicative, human-level intelligence, human communication intelligence level dog. I mean, dogs are pretty smart in their own way, but they have access to so much information that we don't have. Their smell system, I mean, we have so bad noses, they're horrible.
Oh, yeah. Dogs smell in layers.
Probably. We have no idea because we don't have
Right.
anything in our brains that is similar enough for us
Right.
to...
So the person could be in there and then be like, "Oh, okay. Here's what's really happening." Start like typing with the nose or however the
Yeah.
dog would and explaining. Oh, now I want to do this.
Yes.
God.
But then you would have to sort of rebuild your brain because we don't have that neural... I mean, we have the neural system to smell things, but it's so much bigger in a dog.
Right.
So you would also have a change of personality based on that input.
Right. So what does this mean? So we're saying that it's hard to produce human, it's hard to produce human style computers that really will act like us and feel like us and value what we value. But the question is, if they do build something that is human level intelligent, whatever you want to call that, it has the capacity to solve problems, that kind of problems that we could solve or whatever. If we can do that, then without those hormones, without those things that make us biology, I always just assumed that it would be, I always said it's like my laptop. It's not any, even if it becomes super intelligent, it doesn't have any more human to it or empathy to it or anything like that than the laptop does without being specifically programmed. So what do you think that's going to be like if we get to a computer that can be as smart as we are, but there's no, there's none of this other biological stuff and human stuff?
Well, I think, first of all, we're going to have a huge problem communicating with it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we have such problems communicating with octopus. It's not, I mean... this is
with each other.
Yeah, I mean, we have problems communicating. I mean, we are not very good at communicating with other intelligent beings
Right.
on this earth. We are not good at it. We're trying to make things that are almost as smart as us do things like, well, go through that hoop if you mean yes, and go through that hoop if you mean no.
Yeah.
And we can only do that for the species who are extremely willing to try to communicate. So like a dolphin or a dog or something like that. We can't do that with an octopus because that would be, the octopus would just go,
Right.
fuck are you trying to get me to do, and why would I do that, and go away and stop disturbing me. And
Right.
that does not
The octopus
mean...
doesn't even have bones. He doesn't want to deal with you. He has his own issues.
He has his own issues, and you can't really even... They don't have a drive to communicate with humans. They communicate with each other beautifully, but they wouldn't have a drive to communicate with humans. And I think you might have the same problem with an AI. Like, why should it communicate with humans unless you really program it to?
Right.
Why would it want to do that? And how should we understand it? How should we communicate with it?
Well, that's the question: is can we really program it too? That's what they're trying. But there's so many different things to think about, and it's so easy to mess it up.
And I think we cannot understand it unless we make it really human-like, because we're really bad at communicating with other stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But then again, I think that we're gonna have to work on this sort of broad-level intelligence test, because that's what's really missing. You're gonna have to develop some kind of essay to test intelligence that is not human-based.
Right. I think they'll have a scale for computers that we'll come up with, but I think it's a bit of a misnomer to say human level intelligence, because it's like you said, what does that mean? And it's oversimplifying the concept hugely to even say that. But they'll have some system to determine computer level intelligence that can equal a lot of our capacity, and then at that point, the question is whether it then starts recursively improving and kind of skyrockets beyond us.
And one thing I'm really curious about when it comes to development of IE is that if you look at a brain, it is not only the software that is continually changing and continually upgrading, it is also the hardware. I mean, we get sort of new neural connections and we get rid of old ones, and we strengthen some and weaken some, and we get genetic changes. We upregulate some hormone that makes the brain go bigger or more active in one area, and we downregulate a hormone that makes it go sort of blank in another area. And we do this sort of constant regulation and constant changing in both the software and the hardware.
It's like
constantly.
wetware where it changes the...
And is there anything is there anything even being thought about, the constantly changing hardware that would have to go into an IE
Well-
to adapt to?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about that kind of thing, I think that being skeptical about whether we could do something like that, to me, is underestimating just how much progress is going to be made. And something like that, we'll figure that out, or it will figure that out if it's a self-improving situation. I think the possibilities are so limitless for what kind of computer this can be. And I think the ability for it to quickly code itself, to not just change its software, but to actually move pieces in and out of the hardware, to physically build new transistors. I mean, I think that's all within reach once we talk about something that is as smart or smarter than a human. So I think these are all things that are going to have to be thought about. I think that the almost the biggest point here is just that the average person who's pretty educated, but they don't really understand either computers or biology, they're going to inevitably oversimplify and underestimate this whole
Yes.
situation. It is much more complicated than people realize, and it's a little scary because it means that programming an AI to be the way we want it to be, to serve us in the right kind of way, is really like very hard, and it might be harder than creating one that's. The problem is if the AI safety component is a bigger challenge than AI development, that's when you get the development first, and once you do that, then you lose the ability to control it anymore, and that's why it's kind of scary about how there are billions of dollars right now being spent on AI development and AI research, and there's about $10 million being spent on AI safety, like 0.1%, and it's and all of that money comes from Elon Musk, who donated $10 million to the Future of Life Institute, and so it's one of those things where it's just, and it's not like that's going to change. There's not going to be a huge upswing in funding for AI safety because it's not a profitable venture. And so it's just, everyone's going to say, yeah, that's really important. Someone else should kick in the money. I'm going to go do my thing now, and so that's not going to change. And so the question is, the people who are developing it, are they thinking about this? Are they worrying about it? Because I don't know if regulations can stop it either. Regulations don't have a good history of being able to slow technology.
No, not at all.
No.
And it is quite likely to happen, but I think it's going to end up being something very different from basically anything we can imagine.
Right.
Because unless we make it like biology, it's going to be so completely different compared to us.
And there's just no way of knowing, but it's going to have a lot of power. It's going to have so much power over us if it wants to.
Yes, but would it want to? Because it won't have chemicals, and every single want
when I say
is
want,
a chemical.
though, I just mean, right now, like if I press call on my phone, it wants to make that call for me because that's its programming. So it's, the word want in the way we use it doesn't apply, but it will have its own programming. Every machine that we build wants to do its task because that's what. So it's just a question of, that can be bad for us if it decides that we're in the way of its objective. It can also be bad if it decides that we're irrelevant to its objective and it's causing a lot of chaos, just the same way that when humans came to, humans arrive in different places, we end up extincting all kinds of animals. And it's not because we hate the animals usually. It's because we're brash and we do stuff that messes up. So if it starts, if the AI starts mining our Earth for all kinds of properties, for all kinds of chemicals and elements, that could be bad for us.
That could be that could be very bad. Yes.
Right. And so I don't know. I always come back to this kind of thing. Like, I'm really happy it's not my problem to figure this out. And I can just kind of go back and forget about this in 10 minutes and live my life, because otherwise I would be very stressed about this all the time.
Yeah, I'm really. This is such a thin venture, but I'm really hoping that if we actually make a really good AI, maybe that could communicate with the octopus for us.
Yes.
I would love. I mean,
Right.
I'm really annoyed by this lack of communication with octopi.
it could alter an octopus's DNA so that it becomes an intelligent octopus, and then it can talk to us. It can do, if something is that smart, it can going in and affecting DNA, which is just software. It'll be able to go and just it'll.
But I'm more like the octopus is already really intelligent.
Right.
It just is not just communicating with us. I want the AI to be the sort of communication tool between us and
what
the
do we
octopus.
find out when it does that? That the octopus has like a great sense of humor, and it's like a very cool dude, actually.
I wouldn't be surprised. They seem to be amazing creatures.
They are amazing.
Yeah, the whole time, and if you finally communicate, and then the AI tells us like, oh yeah, this whole time the octopus has just been like very, just very unimpressed with you guys.
Oh yeah, sure.
I don't know, but it's it's very exciting. More of me is excited than scared because I'm, as I kind of said. What's my personal fate is personal extinction, regardless of what happens to the species. So just selfishly, that's pretty bad. And there's a lot of suffering in the world. I mean, the world has all kinds of problems. That's pretty bad. So to me, there's so much room to get better that I'll kind of take my chances, I think. And I think I'm rooting for this to move forward, even though, if you take a big step back, that might be kind of stupid.
Yeah, no.
What do you want?
No, I'm the same. I'm more into the whole sort of genetic engineering. What can we do with biology? How can we meld biology? But it ties together. And, we're going to have robots doing the genetic engineering for us really, really soon. I mean, completely automated genetic engineering for us. And then it's going to go, why do you want to change only 10 genes? I can change 10,000 genes for you. That's...
Right. Well, so I actually, because you're a biologist, I had a question. I was.
You're running out of time, by the way. If you want to catch your plane, you have a minute or two more.
We can go a little. I mean, this is. I need to get all the info I can while I have a biologist here.
Shoot.
My question is, I always, think about, and I haven't done research on this myself yet, but I think about reverse aging and stuff like that, and how the human body is just a physical device in the end. It's just a machine. It's just matter. It's just cells and atoms. And it's all stuff that if you just knew how to manipulate it at the smallest level, you could change it. And so actually I used to think, okay, so why can't we just, the only thing that makes people age is when cells age, and you have that thing where the thing gets shortened, and then
the telomeres, yeah.
Yes. So we'll just send little nanobots in to fix that. And then I started to realize there's a few problems with that. One, nanobots have a surface area to volume ratio where they can't really do stuff on that size at that level on their own. Two, it's not like you're 90 and there's some people that are 90 and they can't see well, but they can run really fast. Like 90-year-olds are bad at everything because the whole system's shutting down. And so the only way it seems to me that you can do something like this is the DNA level to recode the software. Yeah.
And then you have the problem of, what kind of cells have really long telomeres?
Cancer cells.
Cancer cells. So you have this, and the problem here, I think we're going to solve, maybe not solve, but we're going to improve aging tremendously in lots of different ways and lots of different scales. But the problem is that it's an optimization sort of problem. So the problem is, every time a cell divides, you're going to have a copy of the DNA. Making that copy perfect takes a lot of energy. So we have this whole system of good enough. Like, we don't want to make it perfect because that would take so much energy that we would have to eat, and we wouldn't be able to reproduce because, we could have spare no energy for anything else than you're making these perfect copies. But we can't do that. So we have this sort of good enough system, and it seems like basically everything is in our body, and this makes sense from a biological point of view, is just the sort of good enough level. Good enough to get by, good enough to have kids, good enough to have grandchildren and help raise them, and then, that's enough. And that is on every single level, from DNA construction all the way up to sort of organs and how they function and how they fail. So going in and sort of tweaking that good enough level is going to be very interesting. And there's a few species that obviously have tweaked them in another way than we have. So say elephants, for example. So basically, the more times a cell divides, the bigger chance of cancer, and that equates to size and lifespan. Now, elephants are big and they are long-lived, and they very rarely get cancer. So obviously, they found a way to do this optimization slightly different, so that they can do more cell divisions without getting cancer, although it'll take away from something else. Probably partly due to the fact that elephants have very, very low reproduction rate. So
Is it possible that we've actually evolved toward cancer because it's increasing the human lifespan wasn't evolutionarily helpful to pass genes on, and actually it may have been a bad thing
maybe
because
sort of better if you died.
yeah, otherwise you have the 120-year-old eating the food of the tribe's food. We don't need him around anymore. He's
Well,
not.
there's a very clear difference in strategy between animals and plants.
Right.
So a plant, a few plants, they sort of age, but they don't age in the same way as we do. They don't have the same sort of fixed lifespan. They also don't have a fixed size and shape. Like every tree is not exactly the same. They don't have the same number of branches or
Right.
whatever. And they're also very good at cloning themselves. So
Right.
most or a lot of plants can clone themselves. They don't have to sexually reproduce unless they really want to. So it seems to be that lives have taken two extremely different routes when it comes to sort of aging and the body, basically, and how do you sort of be in a physical place. So trees, the oldest individuals in the world are trees, and that actually is on two levels. So one is the level of, a single tree living for a very long time that we can sort of grasp. But the other level is sending out multiple clones which are still sort of somewhat connected and,
Cool.
and making new individuals of yourself continuously. And not sexually reproducing, but sending out new shoots of yourself
Right.
over and over and over again. And that is a completely different take on aging compared to what almost every animal does.
Right, so it's like aging is beneficial in an animal species in a way.
It might be, or it might be a byproduct of something else we do.
Right. So, because it's not outliers is the thing. What would be if there were some 200-year-olds out there, or one person that's lived to 150, you'd say, okay, the fact that there's none, 0 out of a 7 billion, 0 have lived past 121 or whatever it is. That is, that says that we are not just, we don't have a propensity to die at a certain age. We are absolutely coded to absolutely positively die by that age,
Yeah.
which makes me think that in order to, kind of reverse aging, it's not about fixing cells because you're fighting against basically your body's desire to die in a lot of ways. It's about recoding the DNA somehow, right?
Well, it might be. I think you really have a point, but I'm not sure. Because you can look at things like heartbeats. So basically, every mammal get the same number of heartbeats. You can plot them.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
It is really interesting. So a mouse, which has a heart that just goes this, is going to have a
lifespan.
really short lifespan, whereas an elephant who go like do-dunk, is going to have such a longer lifespan. So, apparently a heart can only do this thing for this amount of beats. And it's not clear if that is a bug or a feature. It's
Right.
so unclear. Because and all of these things, as you say, they seem to failure at more or less the same time. And
Yeah.
it's not clear whether it's a bug or a feature, because it might just be that, why spend energy after this certain point? Why bother from
Yeah,
a...
evolution
from a-
doesn't care about individuals.
Evolution
Evolution
doesn't-
cares about getting genes to keep moving. That's what ends up being successful.
Yeah.
The things that happen to do that really well, and that's the only thing. But
And you can do that in so many different ways. So there are several species. There's one sort of vole that just goes, they grow up to a certain range, and the males just go on a sort of rampant sex rage, and they survive for like a few months after that, but they lose all of their, they basically sort of wear themselves to death on a sort of rampant sex rage, and then they just collapse and die. at
Right,
the end
and
of
that's
it.
a successful evolution.
That's a successful
evolutionary.
In the same way that, you know, a tree is sort of continuously shooting up genetic copies of itself and occasionally having sex, but most of the time just doing copies of itself,
Yeah.
is also a successful evolutionary strategy.
Okay, so taking this into account, everything you just said, and all the stuff about AI and the potential for it to come around and to give us new technology, what is your prediction for, of every human that's currently alive, whichever of those humans ends up living the longest, how long does that human end up living?
I think it'll be possible to add 100 years. It's going to be difficult, and it's going to take. We might do it.
Do you think someone alive now might live to 200?
I think someone who is really rich and who is prepared to go through a lot of pain and make a lot of difficult decisions will live to 200.
Well, that's
yes.
not that fun, the way you just said it.
No.
I want it to be like the person's just like, you know, like a really cool 200-year-old that's hanging out. Okay, and my last question, because I'm gonna miss my plane, is what are your thoughts on cryonics? Freezing yourself.
Ooh, that is.
So that the people in the year 2500 who have far more technology than we do might be able to very easily say, of course, we can like bring this person back with an artificial body and.
Well, I think apparently we can freeze cells. They're doing fine. We can freeze them and thaw them and freeze them and thaw them, and they're doing fine.
Right.
So individual cells, sure, that works. I think the technology that we have right now is just medieval. I think we're gonna fuck up quite a lot of things within the body without intention, because not all of it is live cells. But yes, I think that might actually be one of the routes in the future of preserving information.
I may
be very different,
but I'm
when you
hoping
wake
that
up.
they become less medieval, like in a few decades when I'm ready to freeze myself. So that's what I'm thinking.
Hopefully, yeah.
All right.
Because obviously we freeze cells and they function beautifully.
Right. You have
when they
embryos
thaw.
and.
Yeah,
of
and
course.
and we can freeze them for ages. I think, it's more about how long the freezer's been there than how long the cell's been there. It seems to work really well.
That's very good to know. It's good. It's promising.
Yeah, so we're kind of out of time.
All right. Well, this was awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for a fantastic discussion.
Yeah, you know stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Me too. It's great.
I know some stuff. You like know lots of stuff. It's great. So thank you.
Yeah,
This
thank
is
you
cool.
so much, Tim
All
and
right.
Torill.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Right, thanks.
Thank you guys.